I was born in the backseat of a driving hurricane. I came up in the back streets of a city with no name. I was raised on trouble, rock when I should roll. I never could control it, and I can't be controlled. I am what I am. I am the back door slam. When I walk down the street lights go out. When I drive through your town, the dogs start to howl. When I stand in the shadow, sparks are in my hair. When I open up my mouth, my voice fills the air. I am what I am. I am the back door slam. People say I'm charming. People say I'm alarming. People can feel the disturbance around me. I don't care what they say, they see. I'm the dust in your broom, 100-proof Everclear. I'm the crack in your ceiling, thump you think you hear. I'm a 3 a.m. phone call, tank of gasoline. I'm a siren stopping at the end of your street. I am what I am. I am the back door slam. People say it's strange. People say I'm dangerous. People can feel how the deal was struck to save my soul and make my own luck.
City Council, more sessions back in session. Roll call, please.
Carlson.
Here.
Maniscalco. Dingfelder.
Here.
Citro.
Here.
Vieira. Miranda.
Here.
And Goods.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. Gentlemen, I tell you, surprising enough, we got through this morning's agenda. That's very surprising. But good work we're doing. Item number 87, we'll go into staff reports. Chief of Staff, he has an appointment, so I want to make sure I get him in and out for administrative updates. There he is. Good afternoon, sir. No volume, sir, no volume.
All right, let's try this again.
Got
Can
you.
hear me?
Afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council. Good afternoon, public. I should be virtually joined by Fire Chief Barbara Tripp and Human Resources Director Kelly Austin, both virtual as well. For the sake of time, I'll try and be brief, but yet as thorough as possible. So two things we want to talk about, and they are separate issues. One is the updated COVID report as it relates to the community and our workforce. And then secondly, I want to give council a brief overview of the vaccine policy that was put out to the various departments, of course, as well as announced to the public yesterday. But we'll start with the COVID update. Everything we do around here starts with data. Talking to the medical community on a regular basis, multiple times a day. We are in a completely different situation with this variant and what John Hopkins likes to call variants of interest, which are those variants that are knocking on the door beyond the Delta variant. And just to give you some context, externally, just in 1 week, some of the surveillance systems that are out there in the COVID community nationwide, so we have a good comparison in the state and at the county level against the nation, we are 650% above the national average here in our county, looking at just one portion of surveillance through the wastewater systems with Health and Human Services surveillance. That's alarming. If you take that data and extrapolate it into the hospitals, we know from talking to hospital staff, and Chief Tripp can update you on some of that, the hospital systems are completely struggling with care management. They're waiting on the entrance ramps. There's all kinds of things going on with the hospital. I can give you all kinds of reports about how they're prioritizing, but I'll leave that to Chief Tripp. And now what Chief Tripp can do is tell you what is happening in the community as far as testing and vaccination sites. And then what we will do is when Chief Tripp is done, I'll pivot and talk about the recently introduced policy under these conditions by Mayor Castor and our attempt to protect our employees and keep our same level of service going forward. So Chief, do you want to talk about what we're doing in the community?
Good afternoon, Council. Chief Tripp, Tampa Fire Rescue. Just to give you a little update on the areas that we have currently. El Lopez, we have as a testing site. Currently, we have given or at least tested over 16,000 individuals since August 10th. El Barnes, we have tested over 5,000 individuals since August 16th. Currently, we do have a vaccination site. Lee Davis Clinic is open 7 days a week, and they're available for anyone that wants to come in and get the vaccination. At the current time, they do have Pfizer and Moderna.
Thank you, Chief. And Chief, remind me, all the vaccines that we're aware of are free of charge, correct, to the community?
Yes, sir, that is correct. All the vaccines and the testing are free to the community.
Okay, and I know your office and Miss Osea Wynn's office have been working hard also in the community to have pop-up sites and other opportunities to vaccinate. And when we hear from the medical community, what we are hearing is that really if we can accelerate the vaccination rate, that's going to be our best chance of overcoming this and any future variants. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we also have partnered up with Tampa Sports Authority, and we do have a pop-up site that would be present at the preseason games as well as the season open game.
Okay. And I want to be deferential to council. Before I get into this other policy, Chairman and Council, are there any questions of what we're trying to do with the community at this point?
Mr. Tinfield, you're recognized.
No, say Deepwater or Cedar, I'm sorry.
Dingfelder, did you have your hand up, sir? Ms. Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief Bennett, Chief Tripp. John, we used to get those daily updates with the charts and the graphs and all that, and they were extremely helpful, and we could disseminate those to our constituents. I don't know if we're still getting those, and if not, why not?
That's a great question. I'll let Chief Tripp elaborate, but it's our understanding that when the state, there's a federal emergency, a state emergency, and a local emergency, but when the state emergency orders subsided, that data either trickled down to nothing or once a week, and it's hard for us to actually get it from all the different sites that we were doing and compile it into a report. But I'll talk to Chief Tripp, and we have a staff meeting in the morning. And I think at this juncture, we may try and assemble something that we can disseminate to keep tabs on the different data points that we do have access to. Chief, am I close with that?
That is correct. So since the state has closed down the information sharing, we only get the information once a week, usually on late Thursday or Friday. And we get information through the EM department. So we can continue with that information and pass it on as needed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I had a feeling that the state was the culprit, but whatever information that y'all get, whether or not it's daily or weekly, I'm sure would be helpful to us. So at least we can see what the trends are. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Chief, you did say that Al Barnes and Lopez we're doing the testing. Are we giving the vaccines there too as well? I didn't hear that portion.
So no, sir, at Al Barnes, it's a drive-through testing site only because of the area and the location. It was very difficult to try to do a pop-up site there. So we went the closest location, which is Lee Davis Clinic, which is less than a mile away. We're still looking at the site at Al Lopez, but currently that is a walk-up site to get the testing only.
Yeah, but because I got a call on that, I guess the website said drive up, but a lot of people were calling and said it was walk up. So I don't know if we've corrected that or not on the site or not. Hopefully we
So
corrected.
walk up is only for Al Lopez. Drive-through is for Al Barnes.
Okay. I guess that was some confusion. A lot of folks were calling because they thought Al Lopez was a drive up, but apparently it's a walk up. So I don't know if is that disseminated on the flyer or on our website. So we can just check to make sure, because some were saying they thought it was a drive up versus you're saying it's a walk up.
Yes, sir, I'll check into that.
Any other questions, Joe? All right, Chief Bennett, continue, sir.
All right, thank you, Chairman and Council. So 2 more points to make, but kind of related, back to the data. When we did the return to workplace back in early June, based on everything subsiding, the numbers were subsiding, the orders were subsiding, and the world was getting busier. So government levels of service had to keep up with the community. We had the first 5 weeks, we had a significant drop from what we had saw internally from back in the fall. Matter of fact, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of almost a 300% drop in our internal cases. But the last 5 of those 10 weeks, we had seen a complete reversal where almost a 200% increase of our personnel have either been quarantined or shown positive. And a few of those cases of what we call the breakthrough cases, where somebody's fully vaccinated, yet they had gotten COVID, and thank goodness, because of the vaccination, it appears that they have recovered fairly quickly. And I want to make a John Hopkins, and again, we get on these webinars constantly about the state of the COVID-19 nationwide, globally, as well as the state of the economy. And the doctors that lead those discussions tend to talk about kind of the prophylactics being in 2 parts. One is the vaccine and the other is the mask. And the metaphor, the analogies that they use is kind of like being out in the rain. If you are vaccinated, it's like having an umbrella. Most likely you'll get just a little bit of a splash on you and you won't get fully wet. But if you have an umbrella and a raincoat, the odds of you getting wet at all are almost slim to none. So for those people that are fully vaccinated and wear a mask, they have the least amount of risk of contracting COVID and of course the variants and maybe the variants of interest that are surfacing around the globe. So what we're trying to do is encourage everybody to get vaccinated, obviously through the new policy. I know council saw it at the same time as our staff because everything is very dynamic. With 4,700 employees, about 20% of those employees are non-bargaining, about 80% are in 4 of the different collective bargaining agreements. There's a lot of nuance that has to be worked through for implementation. We've had 2 internal communications so far. Tuesday night, the mayor put out a letter of information to all employees about the fact that the vaccine was coming on Wednesday. And then from there, this morning, we put out discussions about how the policy will be implemented. And we're working on that for the next couple of days. We have appointments with all of the unions as of tomorrow. They've been very supportive of the concept. They were part of the announcement. The mayor made sure that we talked to them on the front end of trying to put this concept together. But the spirit of the entire policy is to protect our employees and protect their loved ones, dependents, and family members, and at the same time, keep up a level of service of a society that's running wide open. Schools are back in. It's a lot different than when we were teleworking and the world was fairly dormant back in the early stages of COVID. So trying to keep up these levels of service and protect the employees and their loved ones, family and friends, are the most paramount two pegs that we're trying to solve, and we will keep council posted as much as possible.
Any questions, gentlemen? Any questions? All right. Okay, Chief, if nothing else, I think that'll give it.
Thank you.
In your presentation.
All right, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Madam Deputy Clerk, note for the file, Councilman Vieira has arrived. Mr. Shelby, you asked me in reference to moving an item for Mr. Vieira, is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Which item is that again, sir?
Item number 105.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Chair, I spoke to you about it beforehand. I need to go to the doctor for something's,
We know.
yeah.
So
So that just, yeah, that's why.
Let's go ahead and do item number 5, so Mr. Vieira can take care of some personal business.
There you go.
Sir.
All on you, sir.
Oh, sorry,
One-
okay, yeah,
105.
no, I mean, for the interest of time, we have a long day. I mean, I think this is a very, very important issue. It is, to me, a relevant issue for the city of Tampa because we're gonna have in Florida and in the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County, refugees come from Afghanistan. In 2015, we encountered a similar situation where we had Syrian refugees who were coming to the Tampa area. There was some dispute back then with the governor that I hope we don't have today, where the governor at the time, Rick Scott, wasn't going to allow refugees to come in, but mayors Buckhorn and Kreisman said that we should allow these individuals to be welcomed in our city. Again, I don't anticipate that kind of an issue, but without going on about it, I think it's important for us to do this for two reasons. Number one, to show that we do have a welcoming attitude as a city when it comes to these refugees. And then number two, that we as public officials and as a city are going to help to organize the different stakeholders in the community, the religious stakeholders, the civic and charitable stakeholders that can do such a tremendous job in terms of welcoming these Afghan refugees here. You know, for me, it's a very important issue because my parents and grandparents and great-grandmother were Cuban refugees. We came here in 1960, and I always say that the level of compassion that we experienced on so many accounts 60 years ago should still be available to people today. And that's kind of something that we often see, is that a lot of folks use a method or climb a ladder, I guess, if you will, as, for example, a refugee 50, 60, 70, whatever years ago, and then we tend to forget where we come from. And I think that's something that as Americans that we really can't do, is forget where we come from, especially on this issue. We know that over the last 4 years, we've seen a 90% reduction in the number of refugees in the United States. And so there's won't get into that, a lot of controversy there, obviously. But again, this is to me a matter of our best American values being reflected for these refugees. And I think the folks who spoke on this, especially those from Afghanistan, I know it's something that's very important to them. And we've also spoken to a lot of people who are veterans for whom this is so important, because so many of these people help the American mission. So again, I just want a welcoming culture here in Tampa. I don't think this is controversial at all. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions on the resolution? Mr. Maniscalco, you recognize.
I'd like to second that and echo the comments of Councilmember Vieira. He and I are both children of immigrants. We're first-generation Americans, and if you look at the history of the city of Tampa, the foundation of the city is built by immigrants, built by people from all over the world. So this is just a continuation of who we are. We're open and welcoming to anyone and everyone, and I'm glad that he brought this up, so I'd like to second that.
Any questions on the resolution? Mr. Carlson, you recognize.
Just a couple comments and maybe a question. Number one, my family's immigrants too, going back to the 1800s. They came for economic freedom from an economic opportunity from Sweden. But we are a country of immigrants, and we need to be welcoming of immigrants, and Tampa in particular needs to be welcoming. And we have a large Muslim and Arab community here, and we in particular need to make sure we work with the community there to welcome folks coming in. And as was said, we need to be respectful of all the service people, especially around CENTCOM and MacDill, that have sacrificed a lot to help the situation in Afghanistan and other places. That being said, I've also gotten a lot of calls in the last few days about neighborhood leaders and others frustrated that we're talking about foreign policy issues instead of focusing our limited time on city issues. And so I just throw that out there. I have an opinion on almost every country, and there's horrific human rights situations going on. I just watched the movie The Dissenter the other day about the Washington Post columnist who was murdered in the Saudi embassy in Turkey, and horrific things have gone on. And I think we should we agree with the heart and spirit of this. As we go forward, we need to decide how much we get into foreign policy. If we're going to get into foreign policy in a big way, I've got a lot of ideas related to foreign policy also. But the other thing is that the Muslim community reached out to us, and in particular an email, they said something, I think that similar to the Cuba resolution, this is really long. The Cuba resolution had quotes from Jose Marti. This one has George Washington and Thomas Paine. I think that we could simply say we support and welcome refugees coming from whatever country, but in particular from Afghanistan if we want. But the Muslim community went through line by line and gave us some specific feedback on what's in it. They want us to add more action and more substance, and I think some of it we can't because it's federal policy. But I would be curious to see what the maker of the motion would like to do in response to the Muslim community. But in particular, I wanted to point out that they felt there were certain words that were derogatory or inflammatory that they wanted to take out, such as the word terror. And this was in an email, I think, that went to all of us. And so I'm just curious to see if that will, if anybody has plans to take that out. Thank you.
May I respond?
Ms. Rivera, let me see if anyone has anything, then I'll let you rebut. Anybody else, any discussion on the resolution motion this time? Ms. Dingfelder, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vieira, I appreciate you bringing this one forward. I've been on record as saying, kind of similar to what Bill said a minute ago about some of the other constituents. I think we should try and stay local as much as possible. I think you and I philosophically and politically are very much aligned, and we can have lunch and agree on 99% of everything out there in the world. But in terms of what we were elected for, I think people elect us to do, this 101 item agenda of local issues. However, having said that, in the big picture, I totally agree with you, Louis. It reminds me when I was graduating high school and our country was leaving Vietnam. Mr. Shelby and I are about the same age, Mr. Citro. We all remember it well, and now we see the pictures of the helicopter being thrown over the edge and the Vietnamese who helped us and worked with us being left behind. And I'm sure many, many, many of them perished. And now I watch the news, and it's deja vu all over again. It's happening. And so to the extent that our community can send a message, Louis, I agree with you loud and clear. We'll send a message that Tampa is a welcoming place. I'm not going to get into the rights or wrongs of why we were there for 20 years, but we were. And the fact that we had a lot of local Afghanis who were friends of America during that 20-year period, and we can't abandon them now. So on this one, Louis, you have my wholehearted support.
Anybody else for Mr. Rivera rebuts? Mr. Rivera, you have the floor.
And thank you very much, and I appreciate those words, Councilman Dingfelder and Councilman Maniscalco. A couple of things. Again, there is a mischaracterization. I don't know if it's intentional of what I'm trying to do here. Last time I was told that a resolution that this body passed was somehow trying to set us up to go to war with Cuba. I find Councilman Carlson saying that I'm dealing with, number one, we're not dealing with foreign policy issues. This is something about refugees who are going to be coming. We're not saying do something in Afghanistan, et cetera. These folks are going to be coming here, and it's whether or not we are welcoming to them. That is part of who we are as a city. And to take 5 minutes out and to express that in a resolution, I don't think is outside of the scope of what we should be doing. Frankly, again, I find it very ironic because one of the first things that was done in this new council was to do a resolution on travel with Cuba after then President Trump sought to implement on significant foreign policy changes on travel with Cuba. That was a resolution that passed 7-0, and a resolution that Councilman Carlson gave to the ambassador from Cuba. From Cuba. I'm not looking at doing anything like that. This is a very simple local issue, which is whether or not we are going to be welcoming refugees here. I don't think that's an issue, frankly, that is a foreign policy issue. I don't deal with foreign policy issues, et cetera. For me, this is something that is 110% local. It defines our values and who we are going to be as a city. If somebody says that it's outside of our scope, I would respectfully disagree. I've given other council members who deal with issues like, for example, travel with Cuba, some respectful professional deference on that. This issue here is very personal. I have District 7 that includes many, many refugees from places like Afghanistan, like Syria, and this issue, as it applies to whether or not we're going to have a welcoming community here in Tampa, is very relevant. Let's not forget that a couple of years ago, when I was first elected, we had such a significant hate crime here in the city of Tampa when the new Tampa Mosque, right, was attacked and firebombed off of Morris Bridge Road. Right? These are the kinds of issues of tolerance and welcoming of refugees that the city of Tampa has got to take a stand for. I say that as a proud son of refugees. This is not a foreign policy issue. This is as local as it gets, because if the city of Tampa is not going to take a formally welcome attitude on people who are coming here as refugees, and these are refugees, these are not economic immigrants, these are refugees, then I don't know what is a local issue. Again, like before, I thought we'd spend 1 or 2 minutes on this, and we're going further on something that we shouldn't go further on. My small remarks.
All right, gentlemen, I let both of you speak. Mr. Carlson wants to rebut. After that, we will bring it in for a landing. There is a motion on the floor. Whether it regards our foreign policy, this council doesn't get into foreign policy. We have no authority with foreign policy, but we do have the right to talk about a city that is welcoming. Mr. Carlson, you have the floor, sir. You're recognized.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say again, I appreciate the intent, and I completely agree with the idea and focus of being a welcoming community. I've been to 10 or 15 Muslim countries, and I've always been welcome there, and I'd like to reciprocate and make sure that everybody that comes here feels welcome, immigrants and refugees, people from all different religions and countries. My concern, which was similar to last time, is that, as I remember, this is like a 3-page resolution. It doesn't simply say, we want to welcome refugees. It has all kinds of other extraneous language. And I don't object to the intent. I didn't object to the intent last time. I objected to the other extraneous language, which has other meanings that I think borders on foreign policy of not stepping into it. But the question that I would like to have answered, one of the umbrella Muslim organizations emailed us all and asked us specifically to take certain offensive words out of this. And I don't know if there's a new draft or not, but set aside the other discussion. Are we going to leave those specifically large, the groups representing large numbers of Islamic population in Tampa want us to take certain words out, and they'd like us to put certain things in. And my only question is, are we going to take those things out and put those things in, or are we just going to vote on this as is?
Well, I think we've heard from several of the Muslim groups this morning during public comment who are representatives of those groups. So I don't know the other emails you're referring to, but you had MDF that was here this morning. You had the Radiant Hand, so CARE was here.
I don't know if you all got it. I think you did. This is an email from MDF. Yeah, last night everybody got it, but it's CARE is part of MDF, and I'm trying to pull it up. But the first line in what they say, I can't remember word for word. Here it is. We, the undersigned organizations, would like to thank Councilman Luis Vieira for his initiative and for proposing the Afghan refugee resolution. We are wholeheartedly in support of the resolution and would like all council members to vote in favor of it. We also propose the following amendments for consideration. Number one, please avoid using language that may offend or alienate groups of individuals. This includes the overuse of the word terror or phrases like all good Americans, which can create unnecessary division. Number two, because the population of Afghanistan is 99.7% Muslim, please ensure that local efforts to aid incoming refugees are led by local Muslim agencies, and then it lists them. And then there are 4 other points. I think those other 4 are mostly federal issues, but what their point, I think, with the other 4 is to try to add some more meat or substance into it, besides just being a general welcome. So my question is, considering that this umbrella group of many Muslim groups asked us to do these things, are we going to edit it or just vote on it as is?
Well, there's a motion on the floor with a
May I
second.
respond to this?
Point of order,
for
Mr.
the-
Vieira, Mr. Vieira, there's a motion on the floor. We've had 2 rebuts. Now, at this particular point, the maker of the resolution, which would be Mr. Vieira, if he chooses to want to change, or there's any other council member who wants to have an amendment to his resolution, with him consenting, that will be up to them. Now, before I even get to Mr. Vieira, is there any other councilman that is looking to amend any other wording in the current resolution that is on the floor? Mr. Dingfelder, you recognize.
So, Mr. Vieira, to try and make this as uncontroversial as possible, and to perhaps get a unanimous vote in this council, if we struck the words fleeing prosecution and terror, I think the message is still the same, because it would read, and I'm just reading off the agenda, but I assume it's the same in the actual resolution. But it would then read, expressing unequivocal support of welcoming Afghan refugees, strike those words, fleeing prosecution and terror, and then it would pick up refugees into our inclusive community. So in the spirit of compromise, you know, how would you feel about striking those 4 words?
And may I, or?
Let me get to Ms. Miranda, and we'll clean it all up. Ms. Miranda.
I've been quietly listening. I don't understand if somebody, I don't care who they are, put something like this in writing, and if somebody that part of this organization objects to it, what the hell's the difference? There is terror in Afghanistan. There is killing in Afghanistan. If you don't believe that, then when the hell, how come we lost so many people die for the blood? The people who died, the lady who was here today from the goal, and I forget, I get so excited about these things because somebody's objecting to a word, terror. If there hasn't been terror in Afghanistan, I've got long hair.
You ain't got long hair.
Because something has got, and I'm not on either side here, but I'm just saying, you know what? These things have got to either end, or if we're going to dissect every word on a resolution, all it means, forget all these pages, all it means is you're welcome to come to Tampa, be a nice person, enjoy yourself, and you're welcome to the city. We're not going to discriminate against you. In essence, that's what it means, whether it's this one or any other one. And I just don't understand it. We got to dissect everything that comes here to somebody calling me or calling, I don't give a damn who calls. It's either yes or no. I don't care if it's 7, 6 to 1, as long as it's 4 to 3, one way or the other. I'm not here to have anything past 7 to nothing. I don't play that game. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, Mr. Vieira, we're going to go ahead and hear what you have to say. If you want to do an amendment,
Bring
and after
it to
that,
a,
we'll bring
for
it
a
for a landing
landing.
for a vote.
Bring it for a landing, like you said. So I actually spoke with some folks on that issue. I always have a good number of meetings with Islamic and other leaders here in the community. I have a very good relationship, et cetera, on the issue of good Americans and what that means. That means that good Americans reject bigotry and support refugees. I don't think that's controversial. On the issue of the organizations, I actually was going to, again, I'm sorry with my, that on section 3 over here, I would like to move to strike the names of organizations and just put the appropriate organizations to welcome refugees, because I think there was an inference made or a mistake made on the part of some that somehow that's the list of people. No, this is a resolution that is an aspiration that we should live to as elected official. With regards to the issue of terror and whatnot, I don't see the need to take that out. I just respectfully don't. again, I'm very surprised this has lasted longer than 1 minute in terms of the debate on this. I'm not looking at doing anything other than simply saying the city of Tampa is welcoming of these refugees. End of story. That's it.
All right, so at this point, what I'm hearing is you're not inclined to amend the word terror from Mr. Dingfelder or Mr. Carlson, but you are looking to change one portion of the organizations listed in the resolution. Is that correct, sir?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Mr. Shelby, you're recognized.
Just so that the record is clear then, if you take a look at the title says, requesting that all local public entities work with appropriate social service organizations to welcome refugees. Do you wish to then make the language in Section 3 consistent with what's in the title then?
Certainly, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Even the way I read Section 3,
I know.
there's another, and so many other organizations to welcome refugees.
I know.
I'm not the writer, but I would imagine that if I was writing, I might have used one or two of this as reference to what you can have. But
Mr. Carlson, Mr. Carlson, you recognize?
I just want to simply say, especially for anybody who's watching or just tuned in, the list that I read off came straight from a list from the Muslim organization. These are not my requests. These are just
I'm not saying they are, sir.
From the community. Thank you.
All right, right now I have, Mr. Shelby has consulted with Mr. Vieira in reference to the language of the heading of the resolution to be embodied in the letter on Section 3. Is that correct, Mr. Shelby?
That's what Mr. Vieira seems to indicate that his request is as an accommodation.
Just for that section, again,
Yes.
if I may, because there was a mistake or inference made in that regard, I have no problem with that.
All right.
That's.
That is your motion this time, sir?
Yeah, sure.
All right, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Vieira with the language changing of the heading to be embodied into the letter. Mr. Shelby, you're recognized.
Just a question on how this works. Is that then the amendment? So you're and the seconder of that motion is, and do you agree with the as amended? So that's what's on the floor now. Okay. So it's not a motion to amend. It's a motion to accept it as amended.
Okay, motion to accept as amended. Mr. Vieira has made a motion to accept as amended by Mr. Maniscalco. Roll call vote.
Miranda,
Maybe, yes.
Dingfelder,
I'm sorry?
Dingfelder,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Maniscalco, Vieira,
Yes.
Citro,
Yes.
and Goods.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Wow. Yes, sir. You're excused. All right. We have item number 5 up on the plate right now. It's going to be the police department. I think they're on floor number 2. Mr. Chief Delgado's here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dingfeld, I believe you had this pulled.
I'll let the chief go ahead and describe what the basic item is, and then I'll elaborate with my question and comment.
Chief Delgado, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council. Ruben Delgado, Assistant Chief. Item 5 is the RFP we put out for our psych evals that we use for our pre-employment screenings. Every applicant that comes in that we go through the hiring process with goes through a psych eval. It's the same company that we will use for our specialty team applications. Certain specialty teams, we send them through the same type of psychological evaluations to make sure there's no issues with them there as well. And then if we have traumatic events, a police shooting or some other event that they have to intervene and do some sort of something we deem is tragic, we send them to get evaluated before they go back to the street. So that's basically what this contract's for. And if you have any questions on it, I'd be more than happy to answer it.
Mr. Dingfeld, you're recognized, and I'll have a couple of questions for Chief myself.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Yeah, I wholeheartedly support this agenda item. Earlier in the week, when you and I talked, my question was, when do we use this service? And then is there an opportunity to expand this beyond it? So right now, we use these services for new hires, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, for new hires to screen them psychologically, make sure they're the type of folks that we want in TPD. And I guess, is this also TFR? And then also, if an officer or a fireman or woman is exposed to a traumatic event or is involved in a shooting, then they go back into the psychological service just to make sure they're clear, right?
Correct.
So my question.
Let me stop you, Mr. Dingfelder. Chief, are we still doing for the same service, fitness for duty as well, sir?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So my question is, and I sort of alluded to it this morning when we had Officer of the Month, is, can we expand this program to have regular screenings for all officers, at least all street officers, because we know it's a stressful job, especially these past year and a half. It's just, more stressful than ever, I'm sure. I can only imagine. So can we expand it whereby regular, street officers would come in every, I don't know, whatever you decide, every year to every 2 years for just a basic checkup. Just like I said this morning, just like we want to get their blood checked and we want to get their heart checked and we want to make sure that they're good, and we're not trying to run anybody out. We're actually just trying to make sure the officers are emotionally healthy, and that's for their own benefit as much as anybody.
Yeah.
What do you, any response?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think you guys heard this morning Corporal Baker and the program he went to. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but just so to give it kind of a little bit of perspective, this contract here wouldn't address some of that stuff. Some of the things we use now that help officers is, obviously, we have the EAP program, where if they feel like they need to go talk to somebody, they can go voluntary now and talk to whoever they need to talk to through the services the city provides. What you heard this morning with Operation Restore, that is through the Franciscan Center. That is something that actually Mayor Castor started when she was the chief here, for officers to go on basically a retreat that they go, and that right now is funded. We find internal funding for that, for officers to go to that, and then sometimes our foundation, the Rise Foundation, will step up and offer some seats in there if an officer really wants to go to that retreat. So that's what's currently in place. Having something, several years back, we did the live scan for them for a physical check, and we offered that to them. If they were willing to do that, we gave them the ability to go get physically checked through live scan. So I could see something similar to that just on the mental check like you're talking about. Again, that would be a conversation with the union, with us, and obviously there's a funding side there that we would have to work through.
Well, not to belabor this, I don't know how the rest of council feels. I think the discussion is worth having. Not only do I think would be important for the individual officers, but clearly important to the community. Because, tragically, if somebody's sort of slipping over the edge but nobody really notices, then maybe a regular screening might catch some of that, and we could provide help before anything bad happens. So I'd like to make a very friendly motion
Let's go through discussions for other councilmen.
Yeah.
Discussions.
Well, you want me to put the motion on the floor so you can discuss it?
Yeah, I want to discuss. I want to ask the chief a few questions
Okay.
before you.
Whatever you want.
All right, Mr. Dingfelder talked about these programs. Now, I will tell you that the union will probably fight what you're talking about as it relates to officers, because what will happen under this provision here is resolution. That's open for the police department in HR to scrutinize that versus in EAP separately. Because when you look at psychological, that automatically goes to the police department. They're going to review that. That's a pre-screening. When you talk about a fitness for duty, police department is going to get that and review that. So there's different measures, you could say, that will deal with what they're asking for versus what you're trying to implement. Would you not agree, Chief?
So I think what we're saying is the way this program's set up, this is the contract we have with the psych examination, where we get the results, right? And we know whether they're fit for duty, whether they're fit to be a law enforcement officer, and we see those results. What Chairman Goods, I think what you're alluding to is if you voluntarily go to EAP, right, the city may necessarily not see the specific results of your thing. So offering a program that's voluntary is completely different than mandating a 2-year checkup.
Because I'm going to tell you, as a police officer who's been there, how officers feel. And they're, even if a commander says, I want you to go for a fitness for duty. That's the most scariest thing for a police officer when you're told to go for a fitness for duty. But I can say, and I'll get to that point, when Scotco was the psych doctor, he was the fairest guy I ever seen. And he didn't always agree with the police department sending people for fitness for duty just to send them. So I don't know about the Bailey group. That's why I had asked the chief, how many doctors does this group have? And I think Scotco retired, and then they got somebody else, and I don't know how the services have been with this other gentleman that they've had. That's why I asked the Bailey group, is there multiple doctors in there? Because sometimes you can screen a person, but you know, it's like anything. One person may screen different than others. And it may be a baseline here, I don't know. That's why I asked in reference to the Bailey group, do they have multiple doctors in that office that are doing the testing for the psychological?
Yeah, so they do have a staff, and don't quote me on the number of staff members she has. She's not by herself. She has a staff with her for that team. So that is, you know, while it says Bailey with the psychological, there is a staff of team members with her that work with her. So and I want to reiterate something real quick just on the EAP. That's across the board for city employees, right? That's anybody who needs to reach out to the EAP system. That's accessible to anybody.
I don't know if anybody else, I'd like to put like I say, a very friendly motion on the floor. Unlike you, Chairman Goods, you know, you've got personal experience and you know the nuts and bolts of this, and you like to work out the nuts and bolts. I'm just sort of a big picture guy, and what I'm suggesting is that Chief Delgado or anybody in his staff look around the country, look around the state, see who else is doing this, weigh the pros and cons, talk to the union, you know, do the kind of in-depth, detailed work, just like they did on the other.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. A lot of times officers hide the emotion of the stress that's going on. And so maybe, as you're indicating, if you're looking around the country to where if once a year or every 3 or 4 years a person's evaluation comes up, you know, they go to EAP, but that's still privately and it's not a part of the police department's record, or they're not scrutinized or what have you, because that could happen sometimes. So if it was something separate, I would have a problem.
And maybe what it is it starts private. Okay, so if they go there, if everybody goes, you know, 1,000 officers, whatever it is, if everybody has to go every couple of years, and the results are private, unless something gets flagged that is serious and needs to get to the attention of those supervisors. So they might have a threshold or something like that. And Chief, I think you told me that even right now in the EAP process, didn't you tell me that there is a sort of a warning flag that pops up every now and then?
Yeah, we have an early intervention process. It's an EIP. So there's certain things that will trigger an EIP as well, where we review certain things.
Okay. But anyway, like I say, I don't know the nuts and bolts of this. What I would like is just for TPD and TFR, I guess if it's applicable with TFR, to look into what I'm talking about, look around the country. I'm sure we're not inventing the wheel here, and come back with a staff report, 6 months from now, and let us know what you find and the pros and cons and the PBA reaction and everything else.
All right, Ms. Enfield has a motion on the floor. The second, anyone?
Well, I'm not opposed to what he said. However, either this motion is going to go up or down, then the motion comes in.
Correct. You will be correct.
I can easily move item 5.
You'll be correct. You'll be correct,
Yeah,
Mr.
point of order.
Yeah.
You brought it up for discussion, Councilman Dingfelder.
Yeah.
As chair of this committee, I prefer to move the resolution.
Yeah, I'm fine. You put that out of the way, but then as long as we're talking about it, I'd
All right, so
Well, then I'm moving the resolution.
second.
Second.
All right, Mr. Central has moved the resolution. Mr. Miranda is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We need a roll call, on that.
Thank you.
Dingfelder,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Maniscalco, Viera, Citro,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and Goode.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously with Viera being absent at vote.
Now, Mr. Dingfelder, you want to make your motion now while the chief's here, I'll let you make that
And
motion.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, before
sir.
before, I sorry to interrupt, but when you make your motion, would you state it in a form so when it appears on the agenda that it's as you want it to appear on the action summary as best you can? I would appreciate that because
Okay.
it's important to be
so-
succinct.
So I'll move that, that TPD, working with TFR, explore and investigate the possibility of adding additional psychological screening services to both departments, and come back, with a report in 6 months. You want a specific date, I'm sure, Mr. Shelby. August, what's that, January, February?
Okay, I'm just
All right, let's say the first meeting in February.
and if there are any concerns by the departments or the administration, certainly they can contact you if they're, with regard to,
So,
I'm just
Chief
concerned.
Delgado, you got the gist of what Mr. Dingfelder is asking, correct, sir?
I do, yes, thank you. So I
That's
just
fine.
want to, real quick, I appreciate the concern, I really do. I'm glad you guys brought it up. But I want to just make sure that you guys know, as of today, us and Chief Tripp, we do have debriefing sessions on major incidents. So we are doing things to check on the mental health of our officers. But I do appreciate this, and we'll certainly look into it. I know there's programs around the country that we can probably model off of or dovetail off of and get a better idea how to go forward.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor, yes, Mr. Shelby, you're recognized.
And Councilman Dingfelder, did you request a specific deck time or timeframe? We could look at the calendar.
During staff reports,
Staff reports on which
the
date?
first meeting in February.
February 3rd.
Thank you very much. That's fine. Thank you.
All right, motion on the floor, Mr. Dingfelder, have a second. Second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Chief, on that issue, and thank you, council, for your support.
All right, Chief is still here. Item number 6, Mr. Dingfelder.
So I'm super glad to support the additional body cameras. I think they're valuable. The only thing I asked the chief about earlier this week was what sort of information are they gathering about the use of body cameras, and how is that being reported, and is that being reported to council? So that's my question on 6. I totally support the item.
Is that to me, sir?
Yes, sir.
So I can tell you, we review, the 650 that we initially bought was our initial purchase, and we also had a 10% reserve along with that 650. When we expanded this over to all the corporals and some of the specialty units, we added additional 52 cameras. That's what this purchase is for. However, I just want to make sure you guys know that we moved forward with putting those 52 cameras on the street immediately using that 10% reserve of the 65 we had. So this is basically a purchase for those 52 and 15 fleet DUI cameras. So I could tell you, as far as what we get out of the body-worn cameras, we have monthly audits that are set up. The system will randomly pick 10 videos per the squad that the sergeants have to watch, just for quality assurance checks. Anytime an officer is using a certain level of force, that body-worn camera has to be reviewed by the sergeant and the lieutenant, and then documented in the report that they reviewed it for accuracy, and we don't see a training issue, or we don't see anything there. So,
Chief, is there going to be an annual report as related to body cameras, just internal, for you guys, or what?
So we do monthly quality assurance checks on them. We do where we can see the number of audits being done by the districts, the number of checks being done by the districts. To compile it in an annual report, I don't think would be difficult to do, but we do monthlies as it is.
Okay. So that would be my only request before or after we move the item, Mr. Citro, would be as a separate motion just to have an annual report come to City Council about how the body-worn cameras program is going. I think that was an extremely important issue for the community, and I think for the community to hear about the results and the annual results, and would be valuable not only to council but more importantly to the community. So, Mr. Citro.
I think the chief told me in his meeting that when they are checked, he will know who checked it at any time. That correct, Chief?
Yeah, the system has like a footprint of who looks at the videos and who watches videos. So yeah, it has that. And I think what we're seeing now, and something probably the public hasn't seen, is the types of calls these officers go on, the types of stuff they deal with every single day. I think all the officers would agree that, having a camera on now when they go do their job is more beneficial for them in the long run. And we get to see, just like we talked about this morning with Corporal Baker, when you can see that on video with that guy holding the knife to that lady's head and him de-escalate that entire situation, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we would have never seen that.
All right. Well, you ready to move the resolution, Mr. Dingfelder?
No, I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Mr. Citro's moving it. Mr. Dingfelder seconding it. Roll call vote, please.
Carlson,
Yes.
Maniscalco, Dingfelder,
Yes.
Vieira, Citro,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and Gould.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously with Vieira being absent at vote.
And Mr. Chairman, based upon what the chief said, I think it'd be healthy for council to get an annual report. I don't want the department to have to reinvent the wheel, but just compile whatever data, information, audits, et cetera, that they think are relevant and present it to council once a year, for lack of a better time, let's say, starting a year from now in August.
Mr. Dingfelder made a motion in reference to the body cams from an audit starting in August of 2022.
Correct.
Mr. Citro.
Thank you. You are asking just for a verbal or written report, no videos, because we have to be kind of touchy on that. There might be information that is not meant to be out to the public.
Thanks for the clarification. No, I was just looking for a written report, and then if we have any questions, we can always ask the chief to join us at that time.
Motion's on the floor. Have a second. Second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, chief. Thank you, council.
Okay, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we've already made a consent docket for 89, 90, 91, 82, 93. We'll go to item number 94. All right, we got the money man on screen.
Good afternoon, Council. Dennis Rajero, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you for having me here. Of course, as most of us have discussed, this is a request to extend the maturity date for our current line of credit, not to exceed $60 million. This is not a request for additional debt. This is simply to give us a little time to repay the remaining $25 million we owe as part of a larger bond issuance, either later this year or early next year. Of course, Mr. Massey and I have provided a memo to council, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for council?
So the reason I pulled this, and Dennis and I had a good conversation yesterday, but I do think it's important for the public to hear what is our current use of the, and I know you probably said it in the memo, but what is our current use of the line of credit, Mr. O'Hara, and how did we accumulate that particular debt?
Certainly, I believe I can summarize that pretty succinctly. We took the line of credit out in 2016, anticipating to use almost 50, that's why it's not to exceed 60, just in case, intending to use about $50 million for stormwater projects and general government office project, or general government projects. You may recall that in order to get those stormwater projects up as fast as we could, we borrowed about $25 million, $26 million on this line of credit for those stormwater projects, and then paid off that $26 million component with the stormwater bond issuance. It has always been our plan to do something similar with the remaining $25 million. And to specifically answer your question, the 25 million we've drawn down so far has been used a little over 14 million for mobility projects, including resurfacing, old city hall renovations of approximately $4 million, technology upgrades of over $4 million, and then you'll recall the recent Hannah Avenue design and demo item for a little over $6 million. So there's your 25 million, and again, we anticipate wrapping this up in the larger bond issuance that we've discussed.
And do we have a fixed interest rate on that line of credit?
Somewhat. As we get into detail in the memo, the upshot is we're going to get a little better terms with a little bit of savings, and that's associated with what we call the LIBOR rate, the London Interbank Offered Rate. It's composed of two portions. The smaller portion is the base portion, and that's what may change. We don't anticipate it's going to change very much, nor do our finance professionals. The much larger portion is the spread portion, and that will remain fixed. So when you have that very small portion that can change and the fixed large portion that can't, that's going to stay, and that's a little less, we think we're going to get a little bit of savings.
And what is that rate? Approximately, what is that rate now?
Now that I'll have to turn to the memo. If you give me 1 second. Again, not wanting to get too detailed, you've got that LIBOR rate that's broken out into two different components. The base, that very small portion, will go from 70 to 80%. So that's an increase, but it's a very small portion, again, of that fee. The spread will actually be reduced from nearly 0.6% down to just over 0.3%, representing a total savings to the city of 0.25%.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? All right.
Second.
Mr. Maniscalco is moving the resolution. Ms. Dingfelter seconded it. Roll call vote.
Citro,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Dingfelder,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Maniscalco, Vieira, and Goods.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously with Vieira being absent at vote.
Ms. Collins, you recognize.
Could I just, Mr. O'Hara, while you're on there, could I just ask you a quick question? I've had several nonprofits and others call me in the past few days and say they find the budget more difficult to navigate this year, especially drilling down to individual line items. Is there something different about the way it's set up this year, or are there any tips or recommendations you might have to the public so they can get all the information?
No, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. We have gotten similar feedback. And again, I guess anecdotally, it'll depend on just how detailed you want to be. What we've tried to do is provide two formats. The typical format that almost everybody's used to, including myself, and that is the printed format. And then that OpenGov program format, which as we, including myself, get more and more used to it, I think we're gonna fall in love with it. It allows so many more inquiries and so much more detail if you're inclined to go that route. My first suggestion would be please call me or my office. One of our analysts can walk you through that OpenGov program. Secondly, if you go on our website, we've got the, for lack of a better term, traditional budget out there with the PDF that would typically, in the old days, would typically be a hard copy. And then that just proceeds right along with the table of contents. So we understand it is a new platform, again, in an effort at increasing transparency both to, candidly, internally with council and with the public. Is a great deal of information out there, so I can understand why it may be a challenge.
Great. If anybody has a question, email me and I'll forward it to him. Thank you.
Please, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, council.
All right. Item number 95 has already been dealt with this morning. Item number 96.
Yes, sir, Council. This is Osea Wynn, Administrator for Neighborhood and Community Affairs. I submitted a memo for item number 96 and wanted to know if you have any questions.
Any questions on 96, gentlemen? Mr. Maniscalco, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, sir. Just a brief comment. I know that I mentioned Villa Brothers Park. We had the special discussion last week, and how I'd like to get that completed within the next 2 years, and that we allocate that money in the budget to finish this project. But having said that, it would be a great opportunity to expand the ADA accessibility, especially parking. I think there's one ADA parking spot for the park. I believe, I might be wrong, but I think there's just one. And we did make improvements in the last few years. So the entrance to the park off Armenia makes it easy because there's street parking there, and I think we could just expand on the spaces that are marked handicapped or for ADA accessibility. It's the easiest way to do, and it's the easiest way to access that park for people that are driving in. So that's really it. I appreciate the memo and or the written report, and that's it. Thank you.
Director Nguyen, I would ask that the Recreation Department, every time I look around, it's an item for Villa Brothers, another item. I'm hoping that we'll get to the point that we'll say, be able to come to this council, this is what's going to complete Villa Brothers. And that way we have a number to work with so we can get that done and we don't get all the phone calls from those folks over there, because I know they've been waiting a long, long time. They've been promised a long, long time. So if eventually we can get something back to this council, even during this budget time, what is actually going to cost to get all this work done for Villa Brothers, so we can actually know what it's going to take, so we can get it off the plate.
Yes, sir. And to your point, we have had a number of requests over the years. And what we're doing is that we're compiling those lists to get, to make sure it's a comprehensive list, and that we have the costs associated with the repairs, and we will be prepared to come back to you with what those asks are and the associated costs.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much for the comments. All right. Mr. Vieira got his item number 7 out of the way this morning. Item number 98.
Good afternoon, Council. Susan Johnson-Velez, Senior Assistant City Attorney. Council members, I forwarded you a memo transmitting the initial draft of the ordinance to implement the changes to Chapter 14, the noise ordinance, that Council first heard about in recommendations during the April 22nd, 2021 workshop on AB hours of operation and noise and distance separation. With me this afternoon, I do have Simone Savino with the legal department, and also Ms. Feely is on the line as well. And if you have, if we could take a few brief moments, I can just walk you through the recommendations and then the ordinance that is before you. So Council, at the April 22nd, 2021 workshop, Council accepted 4 recommendations from staff. They were: number 1, to create a citywide amplified sound standard applicable to all uses. Number 2, to modify and amend existing Chapter 14 definitions to refine, clarify, and update where needed. Number 3, to address the channel district. And number 4, to update code enforcement provisions for the noise ordinance. So recommendation number 1, if I could call your attention to Section 6 of the draft ordinance that's attached to the memo. This creates a new Section 14-164 in the noise ordinance that prohibits outdoor amplified sound from any property within the city after midnight. So that's the first recommendation. Recommendation number 2 was to modify and amend existing Chapter 14 definitions, and Section 2 of the ordinance contains those modifications and amendments. So you can see there, we've added a definition of amplified sound. We have modified the definitions of dBA and dBc, which are the 2 decibel measurement levels that we use. We've added a definition of sound amplification device. We've modified the definition of sound level, and we've added a definition of sound level meter. Recommendation number 3 was for changes to Section 14-153. first to remove the channel district from the decibel level measurement method. You'll recall that there are two ways that we measure unreasonably loud and raucous noise in the city. One is through the decibel level meters, and currently those decibel measurements apply to 3 districts: the Channel District, the Ybor City Historic District, and the Arena District. And so our recommendation, which council accepted, was to remove the Channel District excuse me, from the decibel measurement standard. And so that would effectively place the Channel District in the other areas of the city section, which is 14-154, which uses the plainly audible standard to determine whether noise is unreasonably loud and raucous. Also in that section, we have established a second tier of decibel limits that we discussed with council. So we have the first tier, which is 85 dBA or 87 dBc between the hours of 6 p.m. and currently 3 a.m. That first tier would be reduced now for that maximum decibel level. It would have to end at 1 a.m. And then we've established a second tier, a little lower decibel maximum of 75 dBA, or, and I realize there's a blank in the version that you have, but that will be 80 dBc between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And then finally, 65 dBA or 75 dBc between the hours of 3 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then finally, council recommendation number 4 was to update the enforcement provisions, and those changes can be found at section 5 of the draft ordinance. Again, in this section, we removed the 5-minute warning, and then we have modified the enforcement by civil citation section to include that new section 14-164. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have. This is presented to council to get your comments and feedback, and let us know if we are moving in the direction that you would like, if there are any other changes that you would like us to incorporate at this time, or if we may continue along this vein and ultimately schedule the ordinance for first reading before council in the near future.
I have questions, but I'll let other councilmen go first. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Dingfelder, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a related issue, Susan, and I think I mentioned this to Carol Post yesterday. I apologize I didn't call you on it, but the folks over in Armature, the folks who run Armature, have requested to be treated, well, to be specifically addressed in the noise ordinance. I think they want to hold outdoor events, and they want to have the more lenient ordinance apply to them. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Susan, or not.
I am. I have spoken to Mr. Harden about that proposal, and I did let him know that at the time that we talked about it, at that point we didn't have any direction from council, and so.
Well, I'm not really sure the best way to approach it today. I think as long as we're looking at tweaking the noise ordinance in this regard, I think we should try at a minimum to address, you know, what they're attempting to do. If we all agree that it's, you know, that it's a good idea. You have any suggestions on a motion that, you know, that would jibe with, you know, with your work schedule and what, you know, what the direction that y'all are headed right now? Abby, I think, has her hand up.
Well, this is the point. This is what I'm not clear on.
If I may, Council, Abby Feely, Director of Development and Growth Management. As you may recall, we had a pretty extensive workshop on this matter, and even had opportunity for public comment at that time. And if you recall even further, you know, we removed the Channel District, due to their growing residential nature, to include them now as outside of that entertainment district and really into the more general, all parts of the city. In looking at just an initial reaction, I mean, there is single-family residential that directly abuts Armature Works in that area, and I would have to examine it further, but in this context, my initial reaction would be, you know, we at least need to have that public discussion, allow those residents to know that this may be forthcoming, and to give them an opportunity to participate in the process, as that was not, nor did we open to any other areas for consideration at the time that we presented what we did to you back just a few months ago.
The problem I have, Mr. Dingfelder, is this. Many, many moons ago, everybody wanted mixed use with retail and entertainment. And you got it. You got what you wanted. Now all of a sudden, we're getting big now. We're getting residents in there, so now we complain about the music, the dancing, everything. Now, if we're talking about Armature Works, hell, downtown is complaining now. Downtown is saying, we got all these places right in front of our residents now. So either we're going to fix the problem totally and say you're going to have just a section of wherever that is that's not going to be interfering with the residents, like downtown. You know, we did look at this side of downtown can't have music because it's going to, the music going to be amplified on the buildings. It only could be on this street over here where it's not from the residents. We have to look at those things because just as sure as Armature Works tells you that, I guarantee the way they're building West Tampa, you're going to have a number of complaints, me and Maniscalco and you, calling, saying the music's too loud over there.
That happens every time there's an event.
Every time. So people understand when they want to buy and move someplace, they need to understand that it could be music, it could be loud music, but again, business owners have to be mindful of how loud that music can be. But I think you need to look at when you're redesigning or doing these drawings or renderings, we need to know where you're going to put this stuff at. What can go where so we don't go and run into this. The other situation I have is that you look at, I've got 2 or 3 music stores that are open area, you could say, and the music blasting all day long and until late evening times. I got Miss Taylor's calling me right now constantly in reference to the store on Hillsborough Avenue. And I've gone by their code, which I don't know why that hasn't gone to the code enforcement board to be addressed, you know. So, I mean, these are some issues as well. So I'm just saying, when we look at this ordinance, we need to be clear how you're going to cut it, Mr. Dingfelder, because I'm telling you, if you do that with Armature Works, downtown is going to be saying they want their own way. So we need to find how we're going to do it citywide to say what entertainment district, what entertainment area should go where, so it's not interfering with the residents. You're recognized.
Okay, so, well, a couple of things. Number one is we have our little park there that immediately adjacent to Armature Works. I can't remember the name of it. Anybody? The one with the band shell?
Waterworks.
Waterworks Park. And we have a band shell there, and we have our own city events there in the band shell, facing in the exact same direction that I think the Armature folks are looking to do, which is have events right there along the river with music and entertainment, and that's kind of what I thought was the whole point of that little, you know, the building and that sort of thing. In regard to close single-family residence, yeah, I'm familiar where they are. They're about 5-6 blocks up the hill, you know, or they're on the other side of those buildings. You know, those are the ones that I'm picturing. But I'm not suggesting that we do this right this second. What I'm suggesting is that we look at it, that we explore it, that we have conversations with the folks from Armature who are running this and who are, you know, want to encourage and have events, as well as the Tampa Heights community and the single-family folks in those communities, and maybe even the folks who are renting in the buildings, although I would think that again, if they came to those buildings and they're renting in those buildings, that they kind of know what kind of district they're renting in. But anyway, I'm just trying to find out the best mechanism to explore these. And Ms. Feely, if you're telling me that we shouldn't do it hand in hand with item 98 and these other items, you know, that are chugging along, I guess we can come back later and do it later. I just thought doing it all at once made sense.
And I see your point, but when I look at all the calls I'm getting from downtown, at this particular point, what do we do about that? So if we're gonna do a job, we need to do the job right the first time, you know, and
What
make
is
sure.
what is the regulation downtown? Is it like Channel Side, or is it like the rest of the city?
I don't know.
Simone Savino on behalf of the legal department. The regulation for downtown is governed by 14-154 of our code, which speaks to unreasonably loud and raucous noise, but it's not measured with a decibel standard. It's measured with more of what we've come to call a plainly audible standard.
So that's the citywide standard, right?
That's the citywide standard, and I'll just provide a reminder that at one point in time, downtown was within the decibel. As late as 2018, it was included within 14-153, which was the decibel section, is the decibel section, but it was at the time requested to be moved, and that's how we proceeded.
And if I can just add to that for just a minute, Simone, thanks for clarifying that. So I just wanted to take just a brief step back on how we got to the ordinance that's before you today. And that is that we were looking to create a more predictable and understandable standard, as there have been a lot of discussion surrounding outdoor amplified sound that ran with alcoholic beverage permits. And when the sound was occurring, people were having to go in and see, oh, what did this bar and lounge get? Oh, what did they get? Oh, and what our initial recommendation to you was, let's do this citywide so that at midnight, there is no more outdoor amplified sound. People can be in their homes, it can be quiet, and they can know what to expect. And then it isn't a moving target, but it's a more understandable standard. So that was one of our first recommendations that is before you today. And the second was those two entertainment areas with Ybor and the Arena District that at one time did include Channel District, and now, much like the CBD, is being moved into that citywide standard versus the decibels. So that's where we are today. We did, spend considerable amount of time on this. Now that this other area has come up, I mean, I would encourage you to move forward on what's before you today in keeping with, because I know there are several of you have been waiting for these items to come back and us to start moving toward addressing many of those concerns that are out there today and setting this standard. So if you would like, we could look at that further in relation or outside of this in relation to the Heights area. As you know, there's one general wet zoning on that area as well. But there are on Palm single family residences and some others, in that area and the surrounding area. And much like you've heard, sound does travel. So I'd like an opportunity to have, a more comprehensive look at what's being raised today in relation to that area of the city and be able to come back with another, a more kind of examined recommendation in relation to that area, as well as public participation and some feedback there from those residents.
Mr. Miranda, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along your term of discussion, like now around the Hillsborough River on the west side, right now it's all vacant, correct? What happens when that develops, which is going to start construction very soon? Thousands of people are going to move back in. And you don't have no complaints now because there's no one there. However, when those arrive there and they're there comfortably, now you may have a problem. I'm not saying you're going to have, you may have a problem. So it's got to be done citywide.
All right, so gentlemen, is it a consensus to go ahead and try to move 98, and while they can still continue to construct and look at these other issues, or we go back to the drawing board?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. It looks like this train sort of left the station, and that's fine. I think the ideas generally are good. Abby, were you saying that? And I'm trying to find this on your memo or your proposal. I'm looking in Sire, but I'm having some trouble finding it. Are you saying that one of your recommendations is to change chapter 27, or is it changing chapter 14? So Joe and I don't have to make the motion on every single wet zoning to limit the number, to limit the hours of noise and that sort of thing? Are we changing that?
So by moving forward today with the chapter 14, placing that on for an upcoming first reading, that will now set a standard citywide for outdoor amplified sound at midnight. And that would be for people serving alcohol, people not serving alcohol, it doesn't matter. At midnight, we go outside, sound goes quiet. And that way, when there is a complaint and TPD arrives, there's no discussion as to, oh, did you get that through your alcohol or not through your alcohol, where that is what the standard would be. So you
I
not.
like that a lot, because it is sort of cumbersome for us to do it on a case-by-case basis. So I think that's great. I guess my only other question is, do we have the ability to waive that on a case-by-case basis? Like if somebody, the other day we had somebody who wanted, who had an operation underneath the crosstown that clearly, would probably have no impact on anybody. And do we have the ability to waive that, in a rezoning or in a wet zoning?
Not that I'm aware of, no. It's a chapter 14 standard and it would be applicable and would not be waivable.
Susan, do you concur on that? Most things can be waived.
Go ahead.
Simone Savino, Legal Department. This would, as Abby was saying, this would operate totally independent, and it would be a code section that is applicable citywide. So therefore, I don't believe it would be something that could be waived on a case-by-case basis. It would just apply to all.
And if I can, Mr. Chairman,
You're
Martin
recognized,
Shelby,
sir.
Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney, just from an enforcement standpoint, I believe the uniformity of it would allow easily to be enforced, as opposed to what you have on the site plans right now, which are very difficult to enforce because it's all on an individual basis. And I don't know whether, I see Ms. Feely nodding, but I don't know whether she wants to address that.
So I think that's a good point, but it brings up another point that I think needs clarification, and I'm okay with that. If we can't waive it, then you're right, it's uniform. But then it brings up another point, is if we've already approved it with specificity on site plans, is that an exception that they're vested with, or do they have to back down to the midnight, regardless of what their site plan says? And I think that's a legal question.
Councilmember Susan Johnson Velez, if memory serves me correctly, and I don't know that we've done a survey of all of the wet zoning or AV permits that you've approved, but typically you require earlier end to outdoor amplified sound on your wet zonings. And so this is going to, I think, be a little bit more lenient than what you typically allow under AV permits for outdoor amplified sound.
All right, well, so in other words, if the existing PD said, noise will be controlled under Chapter 14, if it just said that generically, then all of those existing PDs will have to conform to the new Chapter 14.
I believe you're saying all of the alcoholic beverage,
Yes.
all of the ABs.
Yes.
So if the ABs said chapter 14, then yes, this will now be part of chapter 14. And I believe that was always part of Ms. Capine's rationale for wanting people to put that chapter 14 on there, because if those modifications were then made on behalf of this council, then that is what would control. And yes, that would be what would be in control for those that have the Chapter 14. That is
Okay,
correct.
all right, thanks for all the hard work.
Ms. Central, you recognize.
I'm, Ms. Feely, you know, there are gonna be some people who say, well, now you're ruining our fun. And hypothetically, Fort Greenfields wants to have a St. Patty's Day party. They can still ask for a special use permit to have the amplified music for that one day. And that kind of gets them around this, and I'm only using them as an example.
I doubt it.
No.
This is for outdoor amplified sound
Yes.
only, and I do not believe that a special event permit would exempt that. The thing I would say to council is, in order to continue on our path of being uniform and predictable, if you have or are desiring that on certain days of the year, be it Gasparilla, Super Bowl, you know, Cinco de Mayo, St. Patrick's Day, which you've done on many of your alcoholic beverage, if you want to extend, I've seen this done through much of my work in private sector and alcoholic beverage, there are codes that say on these specified years, it could go to 1 a.m. Or if that were the pleasure of city council, that could be an amendment that could be made and brought back as part of the ordinance. But again, I would hesitate to establish the bar and then start moving the bar. You know, you could still have your sound inside after midnight, but the intent is that after midnight, residents throughout the city, no matter where you are, have the opportunity to be in their homes and not be impacted by outdoor amplified sound.
And Ms. Feely, I thank you so much on this hard work, and I'm glad I will never have to ask those questions again about an establishment having amplified music. Thank you, Ms. Feely.
We're gonna go give deference to Mr. Miranda. We're gonna bring this in for
Thank you.
Orlando.
I know that you said inside, Ms. Feely. I think you're going to have to define what is inside. It could be inside of a tent. It could be inside of a building. It could, you know, I'm trying to be what's coming next, and I understand what they're saying. If you have a standard that everything's got to close at 12, and then you're going to have different amplified music by coming to the council and saying yes, then in essence you haven't changed anything. 12 o'clock is when you can have, before midnight, right at midnight, you can't have no more amplified music outside, correct?
That is correct.
And I agree with you that if you have a way of saying that on special events you can go to 1, then why change it at all? In other words, no sense in changing it. Everybody's going to have a special use permit till 1 o'clock.
Your options would be you could codify it to allow that for everyone on those dates till 1 o'clock, like New Year's Eve. I mean, that would be at the pleasure of council. What we are recommending to you is midnight, 365 days of the year. And that is, you know, with the intent to provide our residents and visitors with that quality of life and peacefulness to be in their homes or in their hotels or wherever it is at that time. And then, you know, if it does not correspond necessarily with the hours of operation of an establishment. So the hours of operation may still be till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, but after midnight, there's no more outdoor amplified sound.
Thank you.
And Susan Johnson Velez, just to expand on that, if I could call council's attention again to section 6 of the draft ordinance where we've created that new section 14-164, and it prohibits amplified sound from the outdoor area of any property. So whether it's under a patio or a tent, the intent was if it's outdoors, then amplified sound is prohibited from those areas after midnight.
Thank you.
You recognize Ms. Scalco.
Thank you very much. Would this apply to Raymond James Stadium? Do they have any exemptions, being that they're, you know, a larger arena and it's open air, not enclosed?
I mean, this currently is drafted, it's from any property.
Okay, so if there's a large concert at Raymond James that goes past, I mean, it can't go past midnight, then they would not be exempt.
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
You recognize, sir.
I think it should, it may go without saying, but just a reminder that if council does choose to go forward with this and it's put on the agenda, you will have the opportunity at first reading to have public comment during general public comment before it comes back for a public hearing and an adoption public hearing. So you'll have the opportunity for public input before you adopt it.
Simone Savino on behalf of the legal department. I just wanted to add a couple of additional pieces of information. We're not manipulating or changing section 14-158 of the noise ordinance. That currently provides for some very specific exemptions. And so I just want to state for the record here that we actually, in regards to Councilman Maniscalco's question, subsection 3 of that ordinance actually speaks specifically to activities in the fields, grounds, or facilities of any schools, sporting arena, stadium, or sports complex. So that's why we haven't seen or been faced with any specific noise challenges. Currently, we provide for exemptions. So I would just ask everyone to just refresh themselves from that section, because I think it would alleviate some of the concerns that are being raised right now.
Okay.
All right. What is this council's pleasure?
The administration, I believe the legal department in its memo is requesting whether council or the department, whether council wishes to have this go forward through the process of having it placed on a future agenda for first reading consideration. Is that correct, Ms. Feely?
Chairman, I'll move for that to come back, see what, and then we have first reading, let the public come in and discuss it. I mean, that's the only way you're gonna see it.
All right, Mr. Miranda has made a motion. Mr. Citro seconded. All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? All right, we'll sit back.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, item number 99. Yes, ma'am, ma'am.
Do you want to schedule a specific date for that item, or just let legal?
Go through
decide?
SIRE, I believe. Will that be processed through SIRE, Ms. Savino?
Ms. Sabino?
It'll just be processed through SIRE. It'll show up on first reading at a future agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 99.
Good afternoon. Mike Schmidt, Assistant City Attorney. I'm here on item number 99. Also present for this agenda item is Keith O'Connor, as well as Master Patrol Officer Amari Elmore is on the second floor, along with Captain Richard Blasioli. We are all here to answer any questions with regards to this agenda item. The request was from Councilman Goods with regards to the Public Nuisance Abatement Board, and which also serves as the Code Enforcement Board. I believe the questions revolved around the role of the Public Nuisance Abatement Board and whether the Public Nuisance Abatement Board, which also serves as a Code Enforcement Board, could essentially, if there was any more activities that they could participate in, or any other roles that they could function in. I think one thing the board that we can explain to City Council here today is that the role of the Public Nuisance Abatement Board is a very important role that this board serves. And just to give you some numbers, Captain Blasioli oversees MPO Amari Elmore, and since 2019, we've included this in our memo, the numbers here, but since 2019, there have been 48 public nuisance cases that have been investigated by the police department. 10 of those cases did not qualify to go to the Public Nuisance Abatement Board. 38 investigations were conducted where a notice of violation was issued by the Tampa Police Department. Of those, 35 properties came into compliance and the nuisances were believed to be abated. The 3 remaining cases resulted in cases being brought before the Public Nuisance Abatement Board. And 1 case is still presently pending before the Public Nuisance Abatement Board. If there are any questions with regards to the Public Nuisance Abatement Board, Captain Blasioli and Officer Elmore are present to help answer any of those questions.
Like, I think
With
the problem is that the public doesn't know the difference between a nuisance abatement and the code enforcement board, but yet you're telling me they're one and the same. So I think that's the confusion with the public of why is this one and the same if it's characterized in our code as a nuisance abatement board and you have a code enforcement board. To me, that's two boards when I look at it. So that's the confusion with the public. Why is that the same? And then when you look at the cases, when I look at the code enforcement board, one case out of a year, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how you have one case of code coming to a code enforcement board when these council members get so many calls in reference to code enforcement issues. So why are not some of these code violations coming to the code enforcement board to be looked at or heard or sanctioned? Because I've got a lady, Miss Taylor, who's been calling every year for 2 years since I've been in office about loud music from that radio place over there across the street. I sat outside my car, I heard it, I called Freeman over, he heard it. So I'm like, why ain't that going to a code enforcement board so those folks can come before the board to get some sanctions or something done? So that's the question from the general public, that why are some of these violations not going to a code enforcement board to be dealt with?
And I'm happy to try to answer that. So currently, right now, we have special magistrates serving in the place of our code enforcement board. Over time, we have found that special magistrates have been a very effective process at handling code violations, and that's where the majority of our code violations are taken. Code violations can also be taken to county court, and a lot of violations are taken to county court either for civil infractions or into county criminal court if deemed appropriate. The Code Enforcement Board and the Public Nuisance Abatement Board are in fact two separate roles. It's just the same board. The Public Nuisance Abatement Board was established by statute authority, and that statutory authority, the City Council decided the Public Nuisance Abatement Board would serve as the Code Enforcement Board, or the Code Enforcement Board actually would serve as a Public Nuisance Abatement Board. And so over time, the Code Enforcement Board's role has sort of been diminished based on the analysis of staff that magistrates were a better, more effective way of handling a lot of code violations. However, because we've heard your complaints as well as some citizens, we've been trying to figure out if there is a role for the Code Enforcement Board to take on. One of the ideas that we have come up with, and speaking with Keith O'Connor, is that Code Enforcement Board could be utilized for bringing public nuisance abatement type cases that aren't criminal in nature. Presently, Public Nuisance Abatement Board looks at criminal type cases primarily. So what we're talking about, and they have to qualify. They have to have for example, two criminal drug cases that have resulted in the last 6 months.
And normally police are handling nuisance abatement, so the public know. Normally police is handling those issues. Code enforcement is not handling a lot of nuisance abatement, not that I'm aware of.
Yes, sir. The police have been handling the investigations of the Public Nuisance Abatement Board and taking the cases through the municipal prosecutor for the board to the Public Nuisance Abatement Board, and it's an onerous process. It requires a lot of investigation, a lot of work, a lot of referrals start by the police department, the officers on the street to the correct unit. And then it gets fully investigated, a complaint gets issued. So these are, even though there's not a high number, the cases that go in front of the board are litigated and are often in front of that board for a period of a year. They have 1 year jurisdiction, and that board meets on a fairly regular basis to look at the cases that are brought there. So when they're brought there, I believe they're highly effective. The problem is a lot of the public would want to bring other cases that don't necessarily qualify for that board, but maybe they should qualify for another board. So what we're proposing and what we're working with Keith O'Connor on is creating an affidavit online where the public would be able to complete an affidavit requesting a certain nuisance property be looked at. Based on the sworn complaint by the person online, it would be sent to code enforcement to look at the property. If they've deemed that there is a violation based on the complaint, they could issue a notice of violation to bring it in front of the code enforcement board. And that would be issued to the property owner. And the property owner then would be brought to the code enforcement board to consider whether that property is a nuisance and whether there's anything that can be done.
I think that's a good idea, because I think the board won't think they're wasting their volunteer time hearing one case a year. I mean, and knowing that we have a lot of issues in the city, when I heard that, I thought that was crazy. So I'm glad that you're looking at now, and some of these non-criminal cases or these smaller cases, usually when people get that kind of notice, I got to go before the board, I'm going to clean my act up now, you know? So I think it's a good idea that, you know, that we got to try to put a system together to help our officers out as well, that there is a way that you can make your complaint, not anonymously, but make your complaint known, and that way, it's all legal, it's there, we go out, we look at it, and if it's valid, we then bring it to the board and let the board look at it, and now we have a legitimate, what I feel, you have a legitimate board, but you have a board now who feel that they're working for the people, and the people feel like they're getting services now. So I'm glad we're gonna look into that. I see Mr. Maniscalco shaking his head over there, and I'm gonna recognize him. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I was on that code enforcement board before City Council, and when it, you know, we closed, like we do with the CRA, it's the same people, we close one set of books, open another, and it was the Public Nuisance and Abatement Board. And if I remember, we maybe acted in that role twice in 3 years, and I remember one of the cases, it was a motel on Nebraska. But other than that, it was generally quiet. And back then, you know, we would meet almost monthly, and but there wasn't much going on. You think a city this big, when we always say we don't have enough code enforcement officers, you would think we'd be overloaded. But these boards, generally, it's quiet. So I understand what Mr. Schmidt is proposing, and perhaps that's a better route to take, because you know we get complaints in our offices, and why isn't this looked at or that done, and perhaps this would help the process.
Mr. Cecil, you're recognized.
Councilman Maniscalco, that's because you were on the board. If you would have been a magistrate for code enforcement, you would have heard 70 cases per day.
I chose the easy route.
I'm all for this. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other council members in discussion? Well, Mr. Smith, I'm hoping that you guys will bring something back to us sooner rather than later. We have a lot of issues going on in the city, and I think this will kind of help us a little bit. Our constituents will be a little bit more happier. They now have an outlet to vent their frustrations and actually see something getting done, and then think that we're not doing our job or the city's not doing their job. So I'm hoping, what are we looking at, 30, 90 days to try to get this moving, or what are we looking at?
Yes, sir. We think Keith O'Connor's president, and we believe we can get this somewhere between 30 and 90 days. We should be able to draft an affidavit and get something online and figure out the processes needed to get this rolling.
Does Keith want to speak?
Good afternoon, Council. Keith O'Connor, Manager, Neighborhood Enhancement. I agree with everything that Mike Schmidt said, and I just want to clarify one thing. I don't want the public to think that we're not hearing the cases. They all go to the special magistrate. That happened about 8 years ago. But we are in favor of trying something to get use out of the board. Since it's already seated, we could get these cases to go there. And the cases he's talking about that involve multiple citizens, and they would collect the evidence like a barking dog, where they have the evidence on their cell phone and they want to get their voice heard, and they can come before the board. So I think it's a good idea, and we could get started with some test cases to see how it works.
Especially that store on Hillsborough Avenue, that music store. I tell you, she's ringing my phone off the hook about that store on Hillsborough Avenue.
Right.
All right.
Simone Savino, Legal Department. I just wanted to second what Mr. O'Connor just mentioned, that in terms of code enforcement, every Wednesday we have hearings all day, and I'm there personally. So as far as code enforcement special magistrates go, They have heavy agendas. The cases have just been previously moved from code enforcement board to the special magistrate. I don't want to harp on that too much, but I do want you guys to know that they're absolutely being heard.
Yeah, well, we understand that. I've come in and I've seen the line in here in reference to that, Simone, so we're not debating that. I'm looking at those other little smaller nuisance, small things that could probably come before that board, and people would get a little fear to say, okay, well, I need to straighten my act up and move along. So I do understand we're working, but, you know, sometimes the public, you know, they want a little bit more sometimes, and sometimes we got to give it to them. So I think this might be a way to give them an outlet to be able to vent and be able to get some of those other cases heard.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, we'll wait to hear back from you, maybe 30, 90 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right. Number 100, sir.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Council. LaShawn Dox here with City Planning.
There she is.
Council, thank you. Can you hear me?
We got you. We see you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Council, thank you so much for your time today and allowing me to come before you to discuss this item. This is an item regarding text amendment cycles. And I do believe I have a PowerPoint that was provided. If that could be brought up, please. If I could have my PowerPoint, please.
That you, Madam Clerk, or is that IT? CTTV, all right. I think CTTV is working on it. Mr. Shelby, could you check and see if CTTV has got Mrs. LaShawn Dox's presentation? Thank you, sir.
And if you like, Council, I can certainly
okay,
start.
I see it coming up. It's coming up right now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, we got
Thank
it.
you so much. And the next page, please. So Council, on this item, you may recall, at the end of January, Council directed staff to come back with options regarding text amendment processing in those cycles. This request was made in an effort to address Council's concern regarding privately initiated and publicly initiated text amendments and having the ability to be able to process an amendment outside of a text amendment cycle. Next slide, please. In May, staff presented an option to Council, and one was to provide 2 publicly initiated cycles, and another was to provide 2 privately initiated cycles. At that time, Council directed staff to conduct public outreach. Next slide, please. And Council, what I'd like to do is just take a second just to take a step back regarding the current process and what's currently in the code. Currently, when text amendments are processed, there is confusion regarding the request. And this may be regarding the type of request, whether it is a privately initiated or a publicly initiated request. Also, there's sometimes this confusion regarding the cycle that the request is run with. So in an effort, what staff has tried to do with what we're bringing before you today is to actually just bring some clarity to that process So staff's initial recommendation of the 2 public processes and then the 2 private processes, that was presented to you back in May at that workshop. Next slide, please. Based on council's direction, thank you. Based on council's direction, public outreach was held. That public outreach was conducted in the form of a public information meeting session, and that was to introduce the idea to the public, receive feedback from the public. Staff came back to council and reported back the results of that session. After that meeting, through discussions with Councilman Dingfelder and staff, we are here before you bringing the option to you today, which we believe would address council's concerns regarding the processing of amendments. Next slide, please. What we're looking to provide, council, or we're looking to provide consistency and to simplify the process. And the way to address that is to provide 2 public cycles. So that would be 2 cycles that would contain publicly initiated amendments, and also to incorporate and provide a mid-cycle amendment, and this would give an option to address those critical strategic initiatives. And that will be available if needed, and those would be items that could not wait for the normal cycle. Next slide, please. So the intent is to hold the 2 public cycles. This would allow for requests to be submitted to City Council or for processing as directed by the Code Administrator. Currently, Council, we have neighborhood associations and neighborhood organizations who would like to submit a private initiated text amendment. And of course, there is a fee associated with that. Sometimes they cannot pay the fee. What would happen through this process is those organizations or even a private member of the public can submit through council. And based upon council's direction to staff, it would be processed that way. You can see from our request that we're also allowing, of course, the time, as I mentioned, we're allowing for out of cycle request. In that way, council is not waiting on that next cycle to submit a change to the code. And that is currently not available and not allowed in the current code. Next slide, please. For the benefit of the public, council, I would like to mention, because I was asked this prior to this hearing today, just to clarify that this is a recommendation from staff. This is not today the workshop for this language. This is a proposal to council and we're waiting on direction from council. But I would like you to know that staff is prepared to start processing these changes immediately if it is council's desire. Just keep it in mind that we still have to conduct public outreach. So we would still have to hold a public information meeting session. We would still need to come back to council for city council workshop to discuss the item and to allow the public a chance to provide comment. But if it is council's direction and you would like to propose that staff move forward on the changes that are presented today, this would be the proposed timeline, the tentative timeline for processing. Next slide, please. And council, that concludes my presentation. I thank you again for your time. I am available if you have any questions.
Any discussion, Ms. Dodd? Mr. Dingfelder, you recognize?
If there's no discussion, I'd like to make a motion.
Motion?
Okay. To direct staff to move forward with staff recommendation and the staff timeline as presented to us by Ms. Dodd.
Mr. Dingfelder has a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Mr. Maniscalco, second it? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Wells, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that motion, I just want to confirm for the record that we would then be workshopping this ordinance on September 23rd.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a motion on the floor. It was a second. There was a vote. It was unanimous, correct, Madam Clerk? Okay. Mr. Shelby, you recognize?
I just want to confirm, that was in the guidelines on your PowerPoint. I just want to just double check. Is that to be added to the September 23rd workshop as a result of the motion?
Unless it was already on the workshop.
That's what I'm asking.
Ms. Wells, was that already on the workshop? Or that to be added?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's not currently scheduled for a workshop. That's why I wanted to clarify that for the record.
Right, and my motion said to.
What do we have on there?
I'm going to ask you to take, I'm just going to ask council just to take a look at September 23rd workshop.
Well, in order to stay on the timeline.
Right.
And get this done, I think it needs to be on there. That's the staff recommendation. If we delay it, then we're going to push this out even further, which I don't think anybody wants.
That's true. Looking at your September 23rd workshop, if it's council's pleasure, you also have an evening meeting again that night at 5:01. That's fine. As long as council does it willingly, knowingly, and voluntarily, no one can complain.
That's the 23rd it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Doc?
Thank you, council.
All right. Item 101.
Good evening again, Chairman and Council. LaShawn Dock again with City Planning. Council, item 101 is a privately initiated text amendment. The applicant is Steve Michelini and John Lum. And this request was heard before council at workshop, and this was in June. And council directed the applicant at that time to conduct public outreach, and the applicant is available. And I believe Steve is online and he is ready. He is going to review the public outreach that he completed and then also review his request with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve Michelini now.
Good afternoon, council. I'm on the second floor, so we have a PowerPoint presentation that's queued up. But before we start, I would like to advise you that item number 8 and 9, which was the East Tampa overlay and the West Tampa overlay districts, both of those text amendments have been removed from consideration. So we have 4 remaining requests for text amendments for requesting that the council approve. And this is approval to move forward. It'll still come back to you. It still goes to the Planning Commission. So there's additional time for consideration by the public as well as any other interested parties. We did conduct a Zoom meeting with Dan, and they invited their members. And that was about a little over a week ago. We did not receive any formal comments from Dan. We did receive one email from the Davis Island Civic Association, which I believe was transmitted to you. Would you like me to go through the requests now or queue up the PowerPoint?
That's on you, sir.
Would you please queue up the PowerPoint, please? Okay, next slide, please.
We don't see it up here on the diocese, gentlemen. There we go, we got it now. Thank you.
Next slide. Okay, the first request is the calculation for buildings within typically an apartment or a townhouse style project. This does not alter in any respect the side yard setbacks or the front or the rear yard setbacks for any of the buildings. There's an extensive calculation that is required that requires you to multiply the length of the building times the height and the width. And we ran into this problem several years ago, and we had 3 different individuals, 2 from construction services, 1 from land development, or actually 2 from land development coordination and our own engineers. And when they did the calculations, they could not come up with the same number of what the separations were, which forced these projects to go to a variance review board for consideration. So what we sat down and talked to the city staff about was to establish a standard setback which would be 15 feet minimum separation between buildings within a complex. And obviously, if there were other considerations, it would be more than that, but it's a minimum of 15 feet separation between between proposed buildings. And do you have any questions on that, or do you want me to go to the next one?
Any questions, Jim? May proceed, sir.
Again, this does not affect any of the adjacent property setbacks or height. It has nothing to do with any of that. Okay, now we're on the second request, which is the official standard to amend the building setback, the height regulations regarding RM24. RM24 is the only zoning district that has a 30-foot height restriction. This would amend that, and you could build in a multifamily zoning district to 35 feet, which is consistent with the RS 50, RS 60, RS 75, RS 100, RS 175, and so forth. So this is the only district, including RM 18. This is the only district that has a 30-foot height restriction. And we were requesting, which also has staff support, to make that a 35-foot height. Are there any questions on this?
Any questions, Jim? Proceed.
The third request is to eliminate the requirement for visitor parking for duplexes only. As the calculation is currently made, a duplex which has 2-car garages and 2 cars in the driveway is required to have an additional space for visitor parking. That visitor parking, remember, these are typically smaller lots, but that requires that the additional visitor parking space, it will take up green space, and it allows, what it's doing is making you request a waiver for green space and paying into the replacement fund for green spaces. We're requesting that the visitor parking for duplexes be eliminated, and that anything over 2 units would require to have a visitor space, but 2 units or less would not. And it has been becoming a problem with the available space that these lots have. When you're already providing 4 spaces for each of the units. We didn't think that you should have to have another visitor space. And if you sell these units in fee simple, it becomes complicated regarding who owns it, who maintains it. So it's a fairly much simpler process if you don't require it. And again, staff supported this request. Are there any questions on this?
Any questions, Jim? You may proceed.
A multifamily townhouse style projects. Several years ago, the code was changed to require that all townhouse projects, that the doors face a right-of-way. If you have a courtyard, then those doorways would face an internal courtyard, which is historically another method of achieving interior green space. It also would provide it would provide for the courtyard privacy and a nicer amenity so that the units were facing interior, and it has a noise reduction element attached to it as well. This again would not affect any of the adjacent property owners. It simply means that you would walk through a gateway. It doesn't affect addressing. It will not affect life safety or for fire protection. It will not be adversely affecting anything. Again, staff is supporting this, and we believe it's a minor modification. Typically what happens is that we have to submit a design exception for elements like this one, or like the off-street parking for visitor parking, or for the calculation for the first request that we put in, or for the height change that I've referenced before. Are there any questions on this?
Any questions, Jim? Mr. Miranda, you recognize?
I don't have a question, I just want the average allowed setback of 20 foot for a block average, whichever is less.
We've eliminated those two, Mr. Miranda. The East Tampa and the West Tampa overlay. They need more work, and the East Tampa just got some new administration as well as the West Tampa CRAs, and they'd asked us to pull those so that we could study them further. So we're not considering them.
East Tampa has the new manager, but East Tampa also, I didn't know until recently, had paid for a text amendment, and it was never completed or done. And I think now they have some people now that come on board that really know what they're doing and understand about overlays and so forth. That they're going to be working with Mr. McCray to kind of move that forward now in the right direction. So I'm glad that's not on the table this time.
No, one of the things that I wanted to mention to council is that all of these amendments started over 2 years ago. And as you know, there's been a lot of changes in administration and how these various projects were administered. And quite honestly, some of as Mr. Goods had pointed out, some of the deadlines had been missed, and we were asked to include them in our petition. So in discussions with them, with both the East Tampa and West Tampa, we've mutually agreed to withdraw them so that there was no confusion and that they would have a chance to work out their own details on how they wanted this addressed.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I see here is eliminate visitor parking for duplex only. So then, how many spaces are each duplex going to have? 1 or 2?
They'll have 2 in the garage and 2 in the driveway. They'll have 4 for each unit.
All right.
Question.
You recognize Mr. Dingfelder?
Mr. McElhaney, just to follow up on that, when we talk about duplexes, there are some duplexes that are the old school duplexes that don't have any indoor parking at all. Isn't that correct, Ms. Doc? I mean, I'm not saying they don't have parking, but they don't have covered parking. They have.
Yeah, this would only, are you asking LaShawn or me?
Well, you can answer, Steve, if I'm talking about the wrong thing. When
Well,
you say duplexes,
this only
I think
affects-
about old school duplexes that don't even have garages at all.
Right, this only affects new construction.
Yeah.
It's not retroactive to existing construction. And I
Wow.
noticed that one of the letters that came in referenced existing construction as well as variances and waivers that have been granted.
No, I know it's just new construction. My point is, I remember we had a case, I don't know, within the last year, it was over in East Tampa, out toward 50th Street, and it was an old school duplex. And the issue, and I think it was a PD, and they were building it new, but it was an old school duplex. And they had some parking issues, and I'm just wondering, LaShawn, is that are we talking about that type of duplex or just these townhome duplexes?
So, Councilman Dingfelder, yes, this is LaShawn Dock with City Planning. I just wanted to make a point of clarification. A parking required are 2 parking spaces. And when you're looking at, it is 2 units that have a shared wall in the code.
Right.
So that is likely what you are referring to.
So the code, Steve says that there's four per unit, but the code only requires 2 per unit, right?
It's 2 per unit, so maybe he's thinking if you have 2 units, then it's 4. But it's 2 per unit. It's 2 per unit, so.
The only thing I was referring to was the driveway itself serves as a parking area for 2 cars. And you still had the ability, if somebody's going through a PD, they could still ask you, going to city council, for a waiver of the design. But this amendment would be for those going straight to permitting that wouldn't be involved in a rezoning process. But it would also show up on a zoning report that you're not meeting that if they were asking to waive it.
Well, a lot of these neighborhoods are already complaining about, if it's traditionally been a house, the house gets torn down, now there's, a quote duplex, basically a side-by-side townhome that gets put on there, and then they say, well, you know, they've got family, they've got kids, they don't have enough parking spaces, and now we're saying we want to eliminate the guest space requirement. I'm sort of surprised to see staff, quote, support out on the right-hand side of that. Ms. Feely?
So I just want to, Abby Feely, Development and Growth Management, I just want to speak to a couple of those items. You know, as LaShawn mentioned, this would be for any product that is 2 units with a shared center wall. So in theory, they're required two spaces apiece. As Mr. Michelini mentioned, it's, you know, if you have 2 spaces in a garage and 2 spaces on a parking pad, then each unit would have 4 spaces. As you are very well aware, there are different types of styles that these units come in that you were just speaking to, and they are not required necessarily to have that parking pad. So if they did provide 2 spaces, it could be in the garage, and then there would not necessarily have to be 4 spaces. So I don't want to speak to if it's this style or that style or what style. It is a standard, and that standard is by the type. It's not going to run with a style necessarily. So what we've run into where it does get a little odd is that on a duplex, these can be for sale units. So if LaShawn owned 1 unit and I owned 1 unit, and then there was required a visitor space, you know, where does the visitor space go? We've run into this in the past where it's kind of an oddity related to the semi-detached type of structure. So I don't think, I think it hasn't been as problematic as when you get to the townhomes that are 3 to 8 units, where you now owe, you know, a couple spaces and there is no guest parking. So, you know, it does show that we're in support. I don't think it is that problematic from that standpoint, but I just don't want to, you know, misconstrue any expectations related to, well, it would run with this, but it wouldn't run with that. If it is a duplex by definition, shared wall in the middle, 2 units, then it would be applicable to that.
If I could add to this, if as long as you're meeting the code for the front yard setback, you have the space between the edge of the driveway from the property line to the edge of the garage. You have at least 20 feet, which is a minimum required for driveway parking. So you would have the space for the 2 additional spaces, 2 additional parking areas. That's why I said you would have 4, and whether you had visitors or not, I mean, these units are typically not large family units, and I understand Mr. Dingfelder's concern about visitors and children and all of that, but you still have 4 spaces, which is normally exactly what you would have for single family.
So you want to change the code requirement to 4 per unit, Steve?
Well,
I'm just being facetious. All right, I understand it. I get it. We're not deciding today, so we'll just keep talking about it. Thank you.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
I can go through the other slides, but I've summarized them, I think, accurately. And as I said, that we did work with staff for quite a while to obtain support for each of these requests. So we're asking City Council to please make the motion necessary to forward this on so we can continue the process.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
So Council LaShawn Dock with City Planning. I just want to clarify, so we have a total of 4 items which would move forward. What we see on the screen here, we have item number 1, number 5, number 6, and number 7. And this would serve as, this is a follow-up, a continuance from the initial workshop. So this would have to be scheduled and go on the track for Planning Commission workshop, Planning Commission public hearing, and then back to council for first and then second reading. So we don't need to take a vote on it, but it's just, if council desire for these items to move forward, this is what would move forward on that tentative processing schedule.
Gentlemen, what's your pleasure? Is there a motion to make this move forward?
I so move to make this, go forward, yes.
Mr. Citro has made a motion to move forward, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carried.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
council.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Deanfield has asked for item number 102 to be continued.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, this isn't pressing, and if we just continue it for 2 weeks, is that our regular meeting in September? That would be fine. Huh?
That's a one-week motion, if you could put it off.
That's what,
Sep-
what do you got, the 14th?
The
Or
30th?
16th, I guess? September 30th, staff reports.
All right.
Okay, this won't be busy.
All right, Mr. Deanfield has made a motion to move, continue item number 102. Second on that? Second with Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, it's continued, September 30th.
Council Chair, this is Osea Wynn. I submitted a memo for that item, so if you would take a look at that as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to make you wait, Osea.
All right, 103.
Chairman, we did receive a written report, but there's also a recommendation
Okay.
on this, and I wanted to move to accept the recommendations made by the legal department. It's all in the report.
Mr. Maniscalco made a motion, make a recommendation on the legal report.
Is that 102?
Question.
Yes.
101?
103.
Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney, is the recommendation to bring it back for a first reading consideration, or do you
Yes,
want to
sir.
see, oh, you want to see it? There's no need to see a draft, because I think it says.
No, it's already, everything is written here, the recommendation by legal, so if I could bring it back, let's say September 30th for a first reading.
If that's council's pleasure.
Have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Deanfelder. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried, September 30th. All right, item number 104, we dealt with this morning.
And number 104, I don't believe so.
No, we
Did you?
didn't? Okay. Okay, item number 104, I think Ron Wiggins, that, what we can do and what we can't do. Yeah.
Muted.
You're muted.
You can't hear me?
We got you now.
Thank you very much. I'm here today to provide a brief overview of the city's limited legal authority to regulate small wireless facilities, sometimes referred to as 5G, in the public right-of-way. I provided the City Council with a memorandum dealing with most of the restrictions placed on local authorities that are preempted by the Florida's Advanced Wireless Infrastructure Deployment Act and the federal government's Communications Act. The memo also addresses the city's current ordinance and our requirements for permit applications. Today, I would just like to highlight a few of the items that I mentioned in the memorandum. First and foremost, it is well established that local authorities are preempted by federal and state law in regard to the installation, maintenance, modification, operation, or replacement of small wireless facilities in the right-of-way. Florida statutes prohibits local governments from requiring pre-application meetings, requiring notices to affected property owners, and prohibits local authorities from regulating the placement of small wireless facilities except for limited, objective, non-discriminatory, safety, ADA, and design requirements. Florida statutes also mandates that a local authority must approve a permit application that meets with the standards and requirements of the state statute and the federal code. In particular, the FCC prohibits local authorities from denying a small wireless application based on health concerns or environmental concerns. And both state and federal acts mandate certain time constraints, otherwise known as shot clocks, and the processing of the permit applications. In short, with the exception of pedestrian and vehicular safety, local authorities have very limited control over the locations of small wireless facilities and right-of-ways. It is most unfortunate, and there have been numerous cases or numerous lawsuits challenging this preemption, but none at this time have been successful. I'm available to answer any questions City Council may have, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this report.
Mr. Sichel, you recognize.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your report. Again, I know that the people of Tampa are tired of me saying this, but this is preemption by our state government, and it's not our hands that are tied, ladies and gentlemen. It's your hands that are tied. I don't know if you're for or against this type of thing. However, if you're concerned about it, I please suggest that you write your state representatives, your state senators, and tell them that we want Tampa to have home rule. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Well, you're certainly welcome.
Anyone else on item number 104?
That was my serious voice.
Anyone else? All right, Mr. Williams, thank you for your report, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Shelby, you're recognized.
Thank you. Are you complete on this item? I just didn't want to interrupt.
Pardon me?
Are you still on 104, or are you moving on?
I'm moving on, back to number 99. We did not make a motion to accept the 60 to 90 days in reference to the code enforcement coming back, presenting their last findings for moving on with the new process.
You wanna a set date?
Let's go for 60. If not, if they tell us no, we can go to 90. I move for 60 days.
Second.
On item number 99, file number CM 21-69410.
October 21st?
That's fine. All right, Mr. Miranda's moved it. Mr. Maniscalco seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Shelby, you're recognized.
I've been asked by the legal department to ask council to reconsider item 103 on the definition of a commercial vehicle. I've been informed that September 30th is not enough time to do that. I believe, they say it has to be workshopped. Not with council, I don't believe, at this point. But it does have to go to the planning commission, et cetera, to go through the process before it comes back. So would it be appropriate for you then to ask that this be processed to be brought back through SIRE after presentation to the planning commission?
That's fine. So I make a motion to rescind my motion of taking this out to first reading, and I think I chose September 30th. So I'll rescind my motion.
Second.
Mr. Maniscalco rescinded his motion, second by Mr. Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
And now
opposed?
I see Ms. Zellman online. Maybe she would assist us.
Ms. Zelman, you're recognized.
Yeah, no, thank you. Mr. Shelby just covered it for me. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make that clear because it's a chapter 27 change. It's an amendment to chapter 27, your land development code. All such changes have to go to the planning commission before they can be adopted by city council. So we obviously couldn't accomplish that before September 30th.
All right, so is a motion needed?
To transmit to the planning commission and bring it back to council for consideration? Would that be appropriate? Ms. Zellman?
Fine.
All right, move to transmit to the planning commission so it goes to the traditional channels. And then
Second.
We'll get this done.
Motion by Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Mr. Maniscalco.
All right. Mr. Shelby, anything, sir?
Yes, sir. Council, on August 24th, you received a memo from Ursula Richardson regarding the fact that on July 29th, City Council made a motion to open the appointment and nomination process for a City Council selection for the Citizen Police Review Board, the CRB, and you set the application deadline for Friday, September 3rd, 2021. And just want to remind council and the public that that is available through the city's website, the application, and you can obtain that. The deadline, again, is Friday, September 3rd, 2021. It's coming up a week from tomorrow, it would be. Now, you set the selection date for October 27th, 2021. Today, council approved the NAACP nomination, And to prevent delaying the training and other prerequisites for service on the CRB, the legal department is asking the city council to make a motion to move the selection date from what it's presently set at by city council, October 7th, and they suggested a couple of dates. One of them is a workshop date on September 23rd. The other one I think is better for council, but it would be at 5:01 p.m. as the first item on the evening meeting of September 9th, 2021. That's a CRA day during the day, and this process would be, I guess, first on the agenda if council wishes to do it, so that it moves up the process to allow the appointees to be able to complete the process in a timely fashion so they can begin their service.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll make the motion for September 9th at, what was that, 5:01? 5:01.
First agenda item, please.
First agenda item.
Second.
Mr. Sistrunk made the motion, Mr. Maniscalco, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, council.
Anything else, Mr. Shelby?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Maniscalco, anything, sir?
No, and nothing over here, so we're good.
Wow.
No, he didn't leave me anything.
Wow,
So
okay.
I expected 5.
That'll be tonight. Mr. Carlson.
I just need to file a conflict form from last week, and I think the clerk has a copy, so could we just vote to receive and file?
Yeah, the motion, Mr. Carlson, receive and file? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, second.
Wait, go ahead. Yes. Yes, second.
Second, motion by Mr. Carlson, by Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Seach. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Carlson, anything else? Mr. Seach.
Two things very quickly. Mr. Chair, motion for staff to give a report on the state of homelessness population and its impact on the city department's community partners, specifically the Tampa Hillsborough Homeless Initiative, the Downtown Partnership, and HEART on September 23rd as a city council workshop. And there'll only be 5 minutes, 10 minutes for the Tampa Hillsborough Homeless, 5 minutes for Downtown Partnership, and 5 minutes for HEART.
Mr. Fitzgerald made a motion, Mr. Miranda seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Number two, I would like to send out kudos to Mr. Brad Bear. We did not hear item 91 today, but he is a real transformer. He went from doing his regular job for the city to saving the city tons of money as a negotiator. And I just want to say, Brad, thank you for all the work you do.
Mr. Miranda.
Thank you, sir. I have a couple of them. One, I would like to make a motion to present commendation to Marae Holmes, our former neighborhood liaison. She has served in this capacity for 8 years, and her unwavering support for the City of Tampa Neighborhood Associations will surely be missed. She had a huge job. The city has 88 designated neighborhood associations, of which 82 are active. Ms. Holmes has moved to another position within the City of Tampa, but as many of us know, all of us believe that without her, the associations would have never got the recognition that they have within the city. And I'd like to present this combination to Ms. Holmes on the 23rd of September, 2001.
Second.
Mr. Miranda made a motion, Mr. Maniscalco second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
And just like that, we don't forget that today is Women's History Equality Day. Women Equality celebrated every August 26th, commemorates the passage of the women's suffrage in the United States and reminds us of all the hurdles they had to overcome by the historic women who faced violence, discrimination to propose a women's movement forward. Also, women aren't done yet, you know. The equal rights thing, the wage gap still exists, and today women still impact women economic power. The gender-based discrimination still plagues workplace and business transaction regarding the women.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
You're recognized, sir.
Sir, I apologize. I just want to ask Ms. Zellman, I see she's still on. In regards to item 103, when will it go to the Planning Commission? When is it scheduled? When is their next meeting? What's the timeline for that?
You're muted.
I apologize. I don't know that date offhand. It usually takes maybe a couple months for us to get on their agenda.
And then it'll come back to,
remember what
then it'll
you
come back to
saw was
us?
draft language has to be put in ordinance form, sent to the planning commission. scheduled on they do a workshop and a meeting. We can certainly, ask them to expedite it. But I just honestly can't say without having someone talk to them to find out where they are in their schedule. Remember, their meetings require advance notice as well. So I just can't predict right now. I would guess at least a couple months to get it through that process.
And then it'll come back to us?
Correct.
And that's it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Maniscalco, Mr. Dingfellow, step up. Can I pass you the gavel, sir? All right.
Chairman, we stand in recess when you finish.
I'd like to present a commendation to Greg Spearman, Director of the Purchasing Department, and his staff in the honor of their recent achievement for the National Procurement Institute Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award, presented on September 30th, 2021.
We have a motion from Councilman, Mr. Chairman Goods, a second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Go ahead, yeah?
My last one, to have the Solid Waste Director come forth and give us recommendations on reference to the apartment complexes and businesses who have the trash bins that are too small for service. We're recently having issues with garbage all over the place, and some of these businesses don't have the ample size for their businesses. And the apartment complexes having these small trash receptors there, and it's not working. Several complaints on that. So I want to know what our solid waste department is doing to combat that. If they are going out, looking at that, how we can correct those issues. Because if someone's paying for a small can in an apartment complex that 5 and 6 apartment buildings.
If I may add
Yes,
to that, regarding the same issue, I have started another avenue because I had received some information from some good, hardworking individuals that work in that department, and also Local 1454, that some of the streets in South Tampa are so small, and they park on both sides, and the truck can't go through, and they have a problem. So if we can add on to that, piggyback to your statement, see if he could come to us. There's only got one small truck, as I understand it. I don't really know that to be factual, but I would imagine who one told me they understand that it is. Maybe we can have some answers so we can solve that problem. I don't want anybody getting written up for hitting a car or something
Randall,
of
we've
that
talked
nature.
about that before, and we talked about the alleys too. So we've talked about those subjects, but hopefully you can come back. Maybe they're working on that we don't know, to bring some answers. But
Mr. Chairman, Martin Shelby, would you prefer that it appear as a Part A and a Part B to the same motion on the same date, same
That's fine.
appearance? Thank you.
Yeah, I believe it was Mr. Lentz
Leroy.
that brought it up because he put a photo on Facebook
Facebook,
or video.
he's
They
right.
couldn't get the trucks down the street because people were double parked on one side. So I'm glad you brought that up. We have a motion from Councilmember.
Mr. Shelby, you're recognized, sir.
Oh, what date do you want? I have the calendar.
What do we have available for a workshop date, or we don't have any more workshops, do we?
You wanted it as an appearance?
Yeah, it has to be an appearance. Make it 60 days. Yeah, we give him time if he doesn't have anything working,
October 21st is a regular meeting. October 28th is a workshop.
21st.
October 20. Give it to 20. Do a workshop because that make.
You want
Give him
it
the
on
20.
You want a workshop?
Yeah, put it on the workshop day.
October 28th, and then we have workshops. We have a couple of commendations. So yeah, I guess what, 9:30?
That's fine, sir.
We have a motion from Councilmember Goods, second from Councilmember Miranda, with a Part A and Part B. We had clarification there for October 28th, 9:30 workshop.
And if they need more speakers, he can call me, but I want to make sure we got it right when he brings it to us.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
All right.
All right. That's it.
All right. Motion receiving file.
So move.
Yeah, but we got to stay in recess.
Yes.
That's-
Well, you could do a motion to receive and file
Right.
now or later, but you could do it. You could do it twice.
All right. Motion
So
receiving
moved.
file.
Second.
Mr. Maniscalco, Mr. Miranda, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand in recess till 6 o'clock.
You got it.
Thank you, council.